Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So today we'll be just getting a very quick cursory review about Scrum or Agile software development framework. Okay, so before we start, I assume all of you have at least heard about Agile software development or Scrum. Can I know how many of you heard about Agile software development or Scrum? We have a raise of hands. It's 2, 3. Oh, that's all. Okay. Okay. So anyway, this whole idea, let's try to see what this all about and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. In this specifically, not, I mean, this is software engineering part, but specifically for the 6th semester project. Now, as we have seen, the software development life cycle, right? So the software development life cycle or software development cycle, as we also saw in the previous lectures or discussions, it's comes to requirement analysis, planning, design, implementation, testing, and integration, or integration and testing, and maintenance, right? So naturally, that's how any engineering process would do, right? You'll have the planning and the requirement analysis, planning and the design and the implementation. You will do the integration, put everything together, do the testing, and you need to maintain. So this is usually the parts that are involved. Oh, there will be a few more parts that are, well, might be coming in, but largely this is what it is. Now, traditional software engineering used to have a model that we identify as a waterfall method, right? The waterfall method, it's flows from top to bottom. Okay, like any other engineering project, whether it's like, let's say, building a house, okay, or some other, like a car or so on. It's usually, you get, I mean, it's the same thing, right? You know, it's you get the requirement, you have a design, and you develop it. You put things together. You might bring the different parts and put everything together, and you do the necessary testing to see, you test with the product owner, you do the testing to check everything is working fine, and then you have to maintain. So usually this is a traditional engineering development, but when the software engineering also started, this is the method that was used initially, so that you will have one of these events flowing into the next, right? So you will gather the requirements, do the design, you implement, you integrate, right? And then you will do the testing. You'll have the feature testing, regression testing, performance testing, and all that. We'll talk about the testing again in another lesson. I know that you did the testing in third year project as well. We had a nice session from the industry, Sanjeev, I guess. But we will talk about this again as well later. And we'll have the deployment, the releasing or installing, and then the maintenance where you do fix the bugs and provide the support and so on, right? So this is usually what you have, and like even my experience in Silicon Valley, we usually this is the way you will have cycles, but it's like you'll have features that will get the requirement and do, but mainly it's like a big chunk of software development will be done in this way, right? Of course, it's never like there'll be a software that you will produce and release and you forget about it. It's not the way. For example, even if you take something like Windows or Office, so and bigger software that you traditionally you will have like a bigger release, which will take a longer time and so on, which will go through this process, right? So the problem is that in the waterfall method, when you say it's requirements, these things changes. So I mentioned this one even last time or yesterday. What happens is that you might think like sometimes like when you are building a house, sometimes you actually build the house that the architect wants, like so the requirements are not really properly obtained, or it could be that the requirements you think you need something, and when you are building that you think no, let's change this one, this doesn't look nice, or this is not exactly what I want, and so on. Or maybe you have come across something better and say, instead of this one, can we include this one? So usually, right, so there could be many different things. One is the evolution of the product, like the customer who would have new requirements coming in, right? It's not that you at a certain time you said, okay, fine, you can't give any more requirements, you can't change your requirements, that's done, right? So you cannot block and say, okay, hard luck, this is all you gave. Now, if you change your mind, we can't do anything about it. We go on producing. That's, of course, it would be stupid, right? And then the design. So like you get all the requirement and you design have like a very big design. Now the problem with this is like you'll have like you have to come up with all the possibilities and all that and design everything. It's like you are building a high riser, so you will know everything that are there, all the requirements, everything is designed, you have the design drawings and everything for all the things, right? And then you implement those things. Now when you're implementing, of course, you will need a lot of people, a lot of teams doing this, right? And then there are many different things that are in the entire thing, depending on how big the software development project is. So these kind of like very big designs, it takes very long, right? And this is the exact reason why waterfall method, the traditional software development methods was software development method was deemed kind of wasteful and also not very productive, because you would you will take too long, and it will cost a lot for the implementation, and finally you might not even have a product at all, because you might run out of funding that you had because of all unplanned things and the delays and everything, and finally you might not even have an end product, but you have spent so much money without having anything, right? So this became a bigger problem. And then you have the things like integrating where for example, as I said, like you have products you have products where you have a new feature, and the new feature you have to integrate into the product. Right, so you will see that's what happened. That's what happens now in, I mean, with the software, you will always get an update, right? You will get updates where the new update will be integrated into the existing product, right? But the like new features. Now the new features, when you integrate, this is one of the dreaded things. It's just like, no. So as I've told you before, I used to do this that in the test team. So the integration, what happens is, when you integrate, whether it works, so it basically goes to the testing part. Now this is one of the things that actually people are still not really, like, if you think about yourself, right, how much do you test, what do you test, right? Do you ensure that the software will not have issues, right? There's no way that you can actually ensure that there are no issues, right? Because we will talk about that in the testing. But how much you test, it's something that you can control. But usually in software development, at least when you're beginning, or these startups and all that, this is one place that you actually kind of skip or squeeze, because once you get it done, and basic testing is like, very few tests, and see, oh, it's working fine, and you think it's all done, right? But with the integration comes whether it will work, right? So it's completely dreaded. Every time you have a release, it's just very tense. It's like extremely tense when you have a release. You will see when you go to the training and then later working as well. Usually a release date, especially for new feature and all that, especially if something you have hyped up or planning for a long time, the integration is usually a big given. It's we've had, even like, we would have a, like, it's like, if we will have a specific launch events, really, like, all this party level type of thing, because if everything goes fine, you bring out all the things and you celebrate, because it's such a relief for everybody. But it's a very dreaded event, and once you test it, then you ship it out, you deploy. So as like, there'll be different ways to deploy it. Might be just release into the market, or if it's a new feature, you can, you can, now it will be usually a download and upgrade, right? So the deployment, and then the maintenance of that one, which will run for a long time. So usually this is how it used to happen. But the problem was that, these things had, like, the waterfall method is usually best suited for a stable, unchanging project, right? So, like, if it's a high rise, if it's a building, we assume that it's like, once you have made the design, it won't change. If you are a person that, when you see parts and like, let's change this one and that one, it's usually what happens is that it will take a longer time. You might have to break things and build it again, and keep changing different things, and it will go over budget, over time, and so, right? So for stable, unchanging projects, it's good, but especially software projects, products, right? Because these things are not like, solid things which takes a lot to break and add new things. People come to expect new features to be added, and that is something that you can do, right? So, like, for example, adding a certain part to a building might not be easy, like, especially if it's a big building and with the structures and all those things. But adding new things to a vehicle might be difficult, like, except for few simple parts. But even changing a complete parts of a software, it's considered easier to do, right? Than another type of engineering project, right? So because of that, and like, because that we can accommodate that, because people will come up with the changes, people will come up with, saying, why can't we do that one, why can you add this one, and so on. So the requirement will keep changing. Like if you want to design everything, so we will see this in later in what we call anti-patterns in software development. We have what is called an anti-pattern called analysis paralysis. I suffer a certain level from that one. If you have a big design or big report writing or anything like that one, I would keep reading and analyzing and all that for a longer time before it start implementing. So it depends on, there are some who would straight away get on, doing something, might not be perfect, but they will start doing something, and there'll be others who will actually plan things and implement, right? So the problem is, the bigger the project gets, it's very hard for you to just go and start doing something. But if you spend, if you want to plan on every possibility, generalizing and all that, usually it will take a long time and go budget over time and all those things. So all these problems are there, while the possibility or the benefit of doing something quickly and allocating all these changes and all that was felt, right? So because of that, the agile software development movement basically came along, where we talk about things like sprint and different parts of different words I use. But the idea is that rather than one big flow, or from one to the next to the next to the next, you go with iterations, right? So you will plan, you will design, you will develop, the test, deploy, review, and launch, and you plan for the next part. So you can add features as you go, like a certain part of the features, or even a simple thing, like we will see how to do that, how depending on how long your sprint is. So you can there are different ways that you can control your agile development. There are many different types of agile software development methodologies, right? So each one will have their differences in the way that is done, but the key idea is that rather than doing getting all the requirements and coming up with a very big design and try to implement everything at once, and just kind of like having a ta-da moment just to release the software, you just keep producing a part by part, and keep testing. Now naturally you should see, okay, yeah, that's the way I work as well, right? Or you might think, I am more like that traditional method of thing. I want all thing to design. So this is naturally there in us as well, depending on what type of a personality you are in the development and all that. So this is the agile software development is an effort to actually put this practice together in a more formal way, to ensure that you don't get stuck in the process. You don't get you have something that are deliverables very frequently and so on. So we will look at those benefits as well, right? So the idea about agile software development is to have these smaller sprints, or iterations, where you will keep adding features or parts of features, and very small changes probably, but to ensure that it's a continuous iterative process, right? So it's different from the waterfall method, where you have like a one big flow until the curtain raise at the end. It's just like, the continuous delivery, continuous integration type of setup. Okay. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So basically, the idea is that, it's a agile software development is kind of like a team-based one, like, so like it's an incremental and iterative one. Like in traditional software development, right? Each person will be given each part. Like, there will be teams, but you'll be doing your part of the work. And because the integration would happen towards the end, or after a while, right? So you will have your features, your parts, your sections to develop. So you will be doing individual parts, and it will all come together in at later. And you will have an end product at the end, right? So it's not incremental. But agile, it's an incremental thing. So you keep adding. So basically, you will start with something tangible very, very early on. You'll have something delivered. So you have a deliverable very early. Might be a very small part. Like, so this is kind of like, the method that we have been using, but we are trying to put we are trying to use the terminology and the process of doing this properly, right? It is value driven. It's value driven in the sense you will try to implement things that are most useful, most value, and then add more things, more features as you go along. So as you see, rather than implementing everything. Now this is something that happens. I know that it's a problem when you become smarter also. I have seen from you, when you develop things, when you come up with the answer, you try to think about all the possibilities, right? Where you think about, because just it happens because you actually understand all the possibilities and all that, or most of the things. So you try to address all that. So what happens is that we will see once again these things in anti-patterns. You will try to generalize more. You will try to incorporate more, and so on. But in agile, you're not trying to implement for everything or cater to everything. You implement the value-based delivery. So starting from exactly like what you need at the beginning, and then keep adding, keep changing. You will have frequent delivery then, right? So the people, the customers can actually see what's happening, can give feedback, right? Give feedback and keep changing, or even if they something that they thought that was really good, they can keep changing, right? So the production quality would improve because of this, because you are seeing what is happening. You identify problems early on. You identify user requirements better, and you can basically inspect and adapt as you go along, right? So the more frequently you do this, you can actually come up with better. So so all these benefits, the enhanced quality of the product, a better customer experience, because they would be seeing the product. So that's transparency also. It's not like you get the requirement, you build everything and you just give it, because the customers won't see what is being produced until the end, right? So you get their requirements, and then you go behind the door, and you keep producing this for 6 months, 1 year, whatever, and then you come out with here you go, where they have no idea what's happening. How much is done. I mean, you can just you don't even know how much is done, right? So you can say, you can give reports, they are done, but there's nothing to show. because like, you're just building the entire system. So there's only like, reports or progress reports rather than some tangible product that you can experience. So the customer doesn't know what's going on. There's no transparency. Because of that, they cannot give feedback whether things are going fine or whether they need any changes, they would like any changes. Now, by providing that, the customer is going to have a bit like, a better experience, because they will be able to keep providing input as you go along very regularly to ensure they get the better experience, by which there'll be enhanced, quality will be enhanced, right? Because of this process, it's easy to do alterations. You can change because you are implementing part by part. If you don't like it, let's change it. You're just depending on the sprint, you're just missing a 1 week of work or something, or maybe even little more, less than that. So we don't really mind, because it's better to know now what alterations you need and implement those than wait until the end to figure out that it's completely non-usable, right? So there are many benefits as such. So with the agile, from the agile methodologies that are there are many, like Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban, Agile user or whatever. Also, there are many such agile methodologies that are there. Well, not like many in the sense, maybe 10, 15, 20 methods main. But the one that is used most is Scrum, and the other one is actually Kanban is actually used in lean manufacturing. So they have come up with this Scrumban, which is a combination of Scrum and Kanban. Kanban or Kanban, I think it's a Japanese word. Kanban, I think. So Kanban plus Scrum, it's Scrumban or whatever. But we will focus on Scrum, which is the most widely used agile programming methodology. So the idea actually, it comes from rugby. People who knows rugby, watch rugby, what in a Scrum is, where all these forwards bind together to fight for the ball. So it's basically a Scrum is like, the whole team works together to have a incremental progress. So unlike a relay, where you like, one part is done and you give it, and the other person runs and give it to next person and they run, which like the waterfall method, you one by one. So you are progressing only one at a time, and then you give to the other person, right? So we like in the waterfall method, we can't do testing until the product is delivered to us. The entire new feature is delivered to us, right? So we wait until, so of course we will be testing the previously released features and all that. So we'll be preparing the test for the next, the upcoming one. But the testing can only be done once it is delivered, right? In Scrum, you get the entire team to work together, right? And work incrementally. So everybody works together and little by little. So that's what happens in a rugby Scrum. So this is exactly why it is used. The word is used because you get everybody together to do incremental progress, right? Iterative incremental progress as a team. Okay, so that's the idea. So that all work together to ensure like every part is like, so it's very solid as a team. Okay. Any questions up to now? No comments? Okay. So let's go into like, okay, so that's the background. That's the kind of the backstory. Why we are doing this and what's the whole idea and all that. Now let's get into the look at what exactly we are going to do and how we are going to do it. Now, so, most of these were referred to by Keshav yesterday. when he discussed the Azure Dev Tools, because that's basically developed with this specific agile method, like agile parts in mind to facilitate this process. So you will see, like when we used started using Scrum, and actually it was difficult, like even at Cisco we were trying to implement Scrum, and before I left, and it's just a difficult task, and you will see why. There are few things that that you need to do to change the process, how the process was done, and it was difficult to implement that one, which has been made extremely easy with tools like Azure DevOps, right? So that's one of the reasons why DevOps have come into the picture, so that the development operations will be handled separately to ensure they don't have to worry about this, right? So that from the Azure DevOps, it's supported, and there are DevOps teams in bigger companies to ensure these processes are facilitated. So we will look at the definitions and different parts of this Scrum process. Okay, so if you look at the entire process, it's you have the inputs from the stakeholders, the teams, the executives, customers, users, and everything. We will see there'll be what we call a product owner, right? Whose role we will look at later. Kesar spoke about product backlog. Basically, it's as we'll say later as well. Product backlog is the features that that needs to be implemented, which will be listed clearly, and you will have the planning meetings and so on, which will identify what we call a sprint backlog or tasks. So you will have the things, items that you need to do, which will be broken down into tasks. So like a task could be just a simple thing, like put a button here, right? Put a a line in this place, right? It's a very simple task. Could be that level, what different levels, it depends on what type of things you're doing, but it's like a very simple task, easily identified, which could be finished. And then you will have a sprints, what we call a sprint, right? So the sprint is usually 1 to 4 week time duration. Usually it's like 1 week, because the shorter the time, depending on the project, of course, type of project as well, but usually the shorter it is, it's like you will check what's going on and you can adapt quickly, right? And then while you are doing this one, you will have what do you call daily scrums meetings. We will look at that one, right? By the end of the sprint, you will have the finished work, right? You will have a review. We will look at what is happened in the review, and then you'll have a sprint retrospective, which will lead to the sprint planning for next week or next sprint, right? So all this is facilitated by what we call a Scrum Master. So these different roles are going to be there, right? So we will try to implement this and see how far we can get in this process, and also how it's going to assist in the software development process as you go along, right? And also that you can integrate this into the Azure DevOps in handling your project. Okay, any questions? Okay, so we will look at the Scrum roles in the Scrum read. So these are like the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum master you saw earlier. So you have the product owner, the team, and the Scrum master. So they are all part of the Scrum team. Okay, so the product owner is basically what we call the voice of the customer. Okay, basically it will capture the product vision, and help create a prioritized list of customer-centric features or the product backlog. Right. So this is basically like you say, okay, so this is the product we want. These are our requirements, and let's focus on these parts first, right? So this is what I want to see first. And these are the features that I want to see first. Let's prioritize in this manner. So implement this first, and then this and this and so on. And then later we will move on to the rest of the product backlog, right? And usually a Scrum team should have only one product owner, because to ensure that there are no contradictory requirements, right? Because it will, like, if multiple people start telling the team do that and do this, then it's going to be problematic. So usually this is what happened in waterfall method, because it's a large project, and usually things you will have multiple people coming up with requirements. There'll be the people like project manager, project owner, and so on. There'll be the sales team and all that, who will come and say different things, which will completely confuse the team and in the development process, the design process, and so on. So in Scrum, you say, okay, look here, we don't want multiple people. So if you have anything, so the product owner, now the product owner is usually in a company, you will have the product owner will be somebody who's internal, right? So even if you're producing something for a specific company outside or a specific entity, the product owner will be the liaison with that particular company, with that particular team, to get the requirements and to ensure that you act as the voice of the customer to the team. So so it's basically the bottleneck or the gateway where the communication between the customer and the development team happens, right? So there's nobody else, which ensures there's one vision, so it makes things simpler, which makes things easier, and there's no confusion and so on, and which allows the product owner to have the direction, set the direction of the product. Of course, because of that, it becomes very, very important as well, right? Especially if it's not a product that we are doing, but we implement for another customer. If the product owner does not do his or her role properly, as I mentioned yesterday also and previously also, that if you don't do a good job in the requirement analysis and also to get in that requirement, it will be problematic, right? So so usually you will have at least frequent product demonstration and all that with the real customers also, to ensure that we are on the right path. But that is entirely done by the product owner, or the management will have certain requirements from the product owner to do it, right? So the product owner will be there, and then the directors or vice president or whoever will have like, okay, so you need to have a sit down with the customer every other week or every month or whatever, to get the feedback. So you ensure that you have gathered everything, but there has to be some feedback with the customer frequently to ensure we are in the right path. So those things do not come into the Scrum, but those are outside. So the onus of the delivering the right product falls on the product owner, because that product owner one is the one who has set the direction of the product. Okay. And this should not be combined with the role of the Scrum Master, who we will see later. And then you have the development team who will basically do the work, right? And this is it has to be a highly skilled cross-functional team, meaning that you will have everybody, like, you know, people who will be the architects, the tech leads, the developers, the testers, and who will be able to, you know, combine with the two. So earlier what happens, like, you know, this was a problem, like even at Cisco when I was in, like, you know, we'll do the testing, and there'll be like some tech lead that who will work together, but we have no idea what's happening with the development. So the development was there, and we were doing the testing, and there was no cross collaboration between that. Now I will talk about that one, not here in the testing case, because it's very important to understand, have a very close relationship between the development and the testing and the integration and all these things, because then you understand each part where you will be able to deliver one. And the other thing is, you know, that you can also use this, what you call, there are transferable skills between these things. You know, the developer would need some testing things, some testers would need the development part, and they will have like different what do you call skills that, you know, you can rub off each other and, you know, get advice on, to work together and so on, which will actually empower the entire team, right? So that's one of the main reasons why, you know, Scrum has become or this Agile methodology has become quite popular, and also, like, you know, used, because it has broken the previous kind of isolation of these teams, where each team will do their work and they would not, like, you know, worry about what the others have to do. Like, so development people would not worry about the integration if something goes wrong. Of course, it comes back and they will do something, and then they have no connection. They will get the feedback, but that's all. Which is like, you know, which will delay everything, right? So you send something, they say, okay, there's something wrong, this needs to be fixed. You get it back, and based on that feedback, you do something. You send it back, or something else is wrong. Okay, you get it back, you do. But there's no like, you know, close day-to-day or even like fully engaged functionality between these different skilled people, right? You know, different people in the team, which makes it like a very, like, which adds to the delays of the entire process. Okay, so once again, a Scrum team would have to be, like, you know, the people who are building the product, but they have to be a highly skilled and cross-functional team, right? So that's what we have in the development team. And then you have the Scrum Master. Now the Scrum Master, okay, so it's called a servant leader. So basically the idea is the Scrum Master is not the person, or not a leader, or not a boss, basically. The whole purpose or the idea of a Scrum Master is to help the entire process, right? So they help it by, you know, removing any problems that you have. It might be with the devices, it might be with some other disturbances that are coming along your way, right? And then you would provide all the necessary, you know, training and all that to the team, right? So the Scrum Master is not responsible to produce anything or to deliver anything. The Scrum Master's role is to ensure that the required facilities and everything that is needed is there, while removing all the problems that they are facing. Okay, so that's the task of Scrum Master. This is usually, so that's why it says it should not be combined with the product owner, because if this is combined, you are like, you will be more like, do this, do that, I want this one, this is wrong and all that, and then you don't worry about, but worry about how they are doing it, right? So you cannot, if you combine it, there's going to be a conflict of interest. So the Scrum Master is like, no, it's not interested in what they are doing. That is the process of, that's the part of the Scrum, Scrum, the development team. They have to come up with, how to do what the product owner wants. The product owner should help with them, like the task in hand. Scrum Master's task is to ensure that they can do the work without any problem. Okay, so that's the idea. It's not a boss or a person who drives them. It's a person who stay in the back and support them. But of course, there has to be probably some hand holding or kind of like, pushing them along, but from the back. Right? So that's kind of the idea. Okay. So moving on to the Scrum events, you have the sprint we talk about is basically the basic unit of the development in Scrum, or one iteration, and then it's time box. So it's like the time boxing happens for sprint as well as tasks. So time boxing is that you say, okay, so that you all know, right? If you have a deadline, anytime you have a deadline, you just do that assignment or whatever, most of you. So there are some who will do it early, but majority of you, or us, me included, we would do that if there's a deadline, right? If there's no deadline, we tend to do the other things which have a deadline. So it's the idea about this time boxing in a sprint. So it's a very short iteration, and you will have this a time boxed events, a task. You have a time box sprint, and then you have time boxed task within that one as well, to ensure that for everything there's a deadline. You can miss deadlines, definitely, but if you are constantly missing deadlines and so on, it's a problem. So you need to address. But time boxing helps move things smoothly. So we will see it in the sprint backlog, right? So, but time boxing is everywhere. So that's to ensure that everything has a specified time limit for you to do, right? And then in a sprint, you have something that you have something like what do you mean by the done, like the definition of a done at the end of the sprint. Because like if you say a sprint is 1 week, you design, okay, at the beginning, okay, this is what we are going to finish, like, but just by finishing, what do you mean? Whether it's just the coding, whether the comments are there, whether it's checked in, whether it's integrated, whether it's reviewed by somebody, whether it's tested, whether it's deployed to test, whether it's past acceptance, and all right, whether the documentation documented and so on, right? So when you decide on a sprint, you need to say you have like, okay, we will have it done by the end of the sprint. Okay, so like end of this week, by that day. And what we have done, like we'll have this part coded, we'll have that parts integrated and all that, previous parts integrated, tested and all that. So you'll have different type of work, right? There'll be some features which you'll implement but would not have integrated. You are testing it differently. You will have things, but then you will have but the main idea is that you will have a working product, right? So any new things that you are doing, those things would most probably not come into the sprint, because that things will be implemented later, but you can have it as tasks each day. But ultimately, at the end of the sprint, you need to integrate these and have an end product. So that's the idea, is even if you stop in all the work by the end of this week, you run out of your funding, you will have a working product. So it's as I said, it's an incremental product. So if everything, even if everything stops right away, you will have something that is working, right? Which you can take and probably add different things at a later time, right? Unlike the traditional method where you will be still doing parts here and there, but you have not integrated anything, have not tested and all. So you should have this definition of done where you have done all these things, right? The other things you can have, but it has to be part of the end product to be considered as done, right? And you can't add any new items during a sprint, like, oh, shall we do that and this? Okay, wait, you have to wait it for the next iteration. Now, why do we have these rules? Because if you violate these things, right, it seems like a very simple thing, right? But it's unless, so what happens usually is that people, if you ask a lot of people implement this Scrum. But problem is, you know how you would know how bosses and leaders are. They're so used to, like, getting a new thing and getting all hyped up and, oh, no, just add this and I change this one and all that. What happens because of that? Like, so for example, think about this, like, say you plan something, like, I know, like, you are very successful people, that's why you're here, but also you also have problems in the assignment submission and all those, planning your work, time management and all that. What usually happens is that you will have something prioritized, and while you are doing that, you will get something new, right? When something new added to the pile, what happens, that might become important or needs to be delivered right away, and you start focusing on that one, and this one get on the backlog, right? And so what happens is, like, if you keep adding new work to the existing work that you already had. Now, this is something that very common, especially in software industry, depending on the where and also different teams and all that. So you consider this is, like, that this is amount of work that you can do, and you do that, and you have already agreed to deliver that by that days and this day, right? And then your boss would come and say, okay, fine, you need to do this one, and I want this by that day. Okay, fine. So you do that one, but then later they come and would say, well, you promised to give that thing also that day. Where is it? Like, yeah, that's when I had to enough time. Now I don't, right? So that becomes a problem. So that, because of that, hold on. think we, sorry, come to the end. Do you have something, another period now? Kanishka? Kanishka, you have another period? Now the subject starting now?
No, sir.
Sorry?
No, sir.
No? Can I take a few minutes to finish it off then?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, there's only a few slides. I just finish it off. That. Well, you have labs. You're supposed to have, like, you're supposed to have 544. Is it lab or class?
It's a lecture, sir, but the madam didn't say that we have the lecture today. She scheduled tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, let me finish it there. Okay. So it's important that that you follow these things, otherwise it make a mess of everything, right? So that's why these rules are there. Usually people kind of ignore it, of course, that creates a lot of big issues. So if you're following this, it has to be kind of like you need to understand. So we will talk about this at the end as well. You need to understand the importance of certain parts when we are doing this, while not becoming slave to this one. Like if you blindly follow something, it will not get the benefits that you are looking for or the results you are looking for. But also, just because you don't want to blindly follow, just ignoring or completely breaking down these things, also not good. So that's why I said, so I have seen this, like, people implement Scrum or Agile, and they just look at what is there, put it on the board and say, you need to do this without understanding why you are doing this. So it's important, like, so, we try to do this Scrum during this process. Look at this slides here or any description of Scrum later and see what did we do right, what did we do wrong, and why. Because it's important to understand this one. Like, you need to understand Scrum is just a process that was brought on to facilitate a better operation, right? So there's no, like, it's not like, hard and fast rule, but these rules are there for specific reasons. If you understand that, then if you know the goal, if you know the objective, you can play with it. But if you, without knowing the reason, even if you force it or break it, it will have problems. Okay, so that's why you need to understand why something is done. And then you have the product backlog, where you look at all the things that needs to be done, right? You create the product backlog items, which will have features, defects, technical work, and the knowledge acquisition. So the features, now these features are implemented by what we call user stories or use cases, right? So they like, I want this to be to display things like this. I want a button to do this one. I would like to click and get this thing and so on. So it's just like the user stories or use cases, right? So it's kind of like, or like a storyboard thing when we are developing like a movie or all that, it's done in software as well. Like you have a storyboard just to show what it looks like. If you go to in the movie production, you should have, if you have watched, you should see there are what is called storyboards, just to give a picture about what you're talking about, right? So so we need to understand before we implement what is needed. So it could be very simple things, or kind of like a sketch or something, right? Or free from text, whatever. But you have the features, and then of course the defects has to be done. That will be very clear, right? So the product backlog items has to be like clear and sustainable, right? So it has to be like, you should know exactly what this means. Has to be very clear so that you can implement. That's why the use stories, use cases, usually rather than free from text, it's easier to have some sketches and specific requirement, which makes things easier in the implementation. Okay. Right. Then you have like the Scrum meetings. The first one is the sprint planning, right? So you look at the current product, right? You look at the current product, what is implemented up to now, and then you look at the product backlog, right? What needs to be implemented, the features, the defects to be finished, and all that. And maybe then other things like the talent acquisition, like whether we need new talent, whether to get new person in, or whether to get a new training or whatever. So that has to be factored in, right? So you have the team capacity, and whether you have the technology, of course, you need to have the necessary technology, and so on. When you combine together, you can go towards the goal. So like you have the current product, and then you have the backlog. So you might have to decide on certain parts from the backlog to be implemented that will have a priority criteria from the product owner, but also depending on the technology and the team capacity to see, what could be implemented and so on. Now you need to understand this sprint is a very small amount of work, right? It's a weekly work. So how much work can you do? So we have no idea if how much we can do once we are pushed, right? But we try to finish as much as possible during that sprint. And that will be a trial and error as well. You plan more probably at the beginning to see that you could not do it, or you spell only a little that you will do and waste too much time, and you will run out of time, especially for this project. But so all these things has to come into the picture. So this sprint planning, as I said, there are different parts here. So first part is the current product and the product backlog. So definitely that part has to be done with the product owner. So the product owner, the team, and the Scrum Master has to be there. Usually about, I mean, for you, it's maybe 15 minutes to half an hour or even 1 hour, depending on the amount of things that you have. So basically, it's the planning of what we need to do, right? So you are going to review the higher priority item in the backlog, right? That the product owner implemented in the next sprint, right? And understand what the product owner wants and why they are, right? So that's not just what, because if you understand the why, it's easy to do. Discuss the acceptance criteria or the definition of done, right? Okay, when we say I want this is what I really mean. Usually it is, I didn't think that you meant that one. I thought that just putting like, no, you need to know, like when you say I want this has to be like clearly mentioned what is done, what means by done, right? So then you have the goal of the sprint. And the second part of the planning is to is for the team and the Scrum Master, like so the technical level plan by the development team, right? So you will get you will use the product backlog and come up with what is called a sprint backlog, or the task, the individual task to be done, right? And estimate the backlog, right? And then allocate and share the work among you. So once again, this will be maximum half an hour to 1 hour per sprint. So for sprint planning, you should spend maximum of 2 hours. So what we plan to do is we will use a Tuesday session for sprint planning. Usually the planning part, we hope that one hour is enough, right? Just to idea like what should we implement for the next week, who's going to do what, and what do we mean by done. That's all, right? And then whatever that is needed, for you to do this one, and whatever problems that you have has to be discussed with the Scrum Master and resolved, so that and facilitate whatever that is needed to ensure that you don't go into any issues during the development. And of course, sprint backlog has changed. Sorry about that. So the sprint backlog is basically the individual tasks, right? So you get the product backlog, and then you make this the sprint backlog with the task. So earlier you will have so you'll have this what do you need, you will have member sign in, you have like UI scripts, front end screens, and different things. It used to be like you'll have this kind of a board where you have the different sprint backlog items that are in there, which are checked out, will be moved to a different column. Which are done will be moved to another column, right? And then you see how things are moving, right? And then this will be discussed in what is called a daily Scrum, right? So in the daily Scrum, it is called what you call a stand-up meeting. Usually, why you have stand-up meetings is stand-up meetings. You can't have long stand-up meetings, right? So this won't happen now, especially online. But the idea is that it has to be like maximum 15 minutes. Don't spend too much time. Just say what is done, what is not done, just to get a review of what's happening. Is everything on point to deliver the things, or if there are any issues, fix those things, right? So that's it, right? Just ensure that I am also on the edge of my seat to deliver and not procrastinate, one, and also fix any issues that you have, right? So you'll have this sprint backlog items, which goes to the daily scrum, and you track these things. Now this will be is facilitated nicely in Azure DevOps, right? So you don't have to even worry about these things, because those things are tracked and done properly, or like it's easier to be done in that, so that it's you can learn how to use those features to ensure that daily scrums are done very quickly. Everybody knows what is happening, what has been done by certain people, and what has not been done, and what you would do for the next meeting, right? And end of the sprint, before the planning, right? So end meeting and planning usually goes together, but since it's the end meeting, we will look at it now. So the planning will usually follow the review. So what we'll have is that we'll have a review with the product owner, right? To see, like, get the feedback, right? Get the product feedback from the product owner, with the demonstration, right? And they will see, right? The product owner will give the feedbacks, right? And the idea is, of course, to satisfy the product owner. And so that's basically what it is. Show the product, what is being done, and get the feedback, right? Has to be informal, no slides or anything, just there's no presentation or something. Just show, okay, this is what we have done, this is what we have implemented, this is we have integrated, and all that. What do you say? So then you get the feedback. Should be very like a small meeting, and with that will be followed by what we call a sprint retrospective. That is like following the review. You will, like, so the product owner can be there or not, but the team and the scrum master will will reflect on the process, right? Like, what went, like, what happened, like what went right, what went wrong. So what should we start doing, what should we stop doing, right? And what should we continue doing, right? So these things you will have a retrospective, which will follow into the sprint plan. Okay, so once again, to look at the entire process, you'll have the product owner who will give the product backlog, which will go into the sprint planning, which will go into the sprint backlog with the team, and you'll have the sprint. During the sprint, you'll have a daily scrum meetings, right, which will be facilitated by the scrum master. And at the end of the work, you'll have the finished work, and you will review it with the owner. And then you have a retrospective as to identify what needs to be continued, stopped, and start, which will follow into the planning, and you will iterate. Okay, so that's the entire thing, right? So any questions on that? Okay, so why Scrum for the 328 or this 6-semester project? Definitely one is to just give you exposure to industry practice, and reduce the anxiety of these buzzwords. So you will, when you go to the interviews and all that, or when they talk about this, you will have an idea, right? And also give an insight out of the theory versus practice. So usually up to now, what's been happening is that you will learn these things in class. You will learn all these things, but you would not do it. If you do it, you will realize what are the benefits, pitfalls, all these different things, right? So that's the other thing. And also, as I keep saying, sprints and daily scrums will help you to overcome procrastination and deliver better quality work on time. At least that's what we hope. Okay. Hope that you will get the benefits. So this for 3 to 8 or 6 semester project, the product owner is going to be the project advisor or the owner who will get. So you might have multiple people also. That will, let's see. The team is of course the project group, and the Scrum Masters will be the instructors who will have to facilitate multiple ones. So we are trying to see how that can be accommodated, but we will see. Sprint will use 1 week as this sprint duration, right? We will let you know when to start, right? And the daily Scrum will have to plan with the Scrum Master. Once again, work with the process so that you will learn the good parts, the bad parts, what to do better. So, and you will also you can give your input when you go to interviews, all those different things, right? But as I was saying, even during the entire thing, like, don't get stuck in the process. Like, what happens is when you have like things like Scrum, I have seen that, people, what they do is like, it's like, something that is said in the Bible or the Quran or the Tripitaka or whatever, like, okay, this is what is Scrum is, like, you can't deviate from this. No, there's no such thing, right? The people came up with this one because, it would benefit the entire process, right? So the idea is to not to get too stuck in that one, but to use it to do the things better, right? So don't get stuck in the process, but use it for the purpose so that you can actually have a better outcome, right? Don't get stuck in meetings, don't turn daily Scrum into this. This is something that usually happens. Usually, like this, stand-up meetings usually comes like, afterwards you just discuss about that one and this one and all the gossip and everything. And it will maybe like in the morning, you are supposed to like just have a quick meeting and then go to work. But it becomes like, Scrum meetings becomes like all the gossips and everything. And and then you'll have a coffee and everything. And like you have spent 2 hours in the morning doing nothing. So that might not happen in here because you are doing it online, but that's like, it should be very quick and then get to work, right? And then there's no there's no individual failures because you work as a team, right? So there are no individual success, you success and as a team. And then the last item, like, this fail fast, fail often. Fail fast, fail early, fail often. It was basically the mantra of Facebook. Now they have changed it. The idea is that it's not that it's not about failing, right? But to identify that success is often built upon learning from the mistake. So it's not to say that if you fail, if you are failing all the time, you are a success. No, the idea is that you fail quick, like, you keep failing, keep doing things. It's not doesn't matter if you fail, as long as you learn from it and succeed, right? So basically, it's not that you can decide on based on many conditions to go for success or failure. It's that the success is usually is through all the failures, right? So that's the idea about the sprint as well, to keep doing things, get things done, and then to ensure that you learn from and deliver the best product possible, right? So that's what we're going to do. I'll stop it there. Do you have any questions? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, we will stop it there for today. And